Why anxious people notice what others miss. There is something strange about the way you walk through the world. You enter a room and immediately notice the tension nobody talks about. You hear a slight change in someone's voice that everyone else ignores. You sense when a relationship is beginning to crack long before anyone admits there's a problem. You can feel emotions that haven't even been spoken yet. And because of this, people often tell you that you're overthinking, too sensitive, too emotional, too worried. But what if they're wrong? What if the thing you've spent your entire life trying to suppress is actually evidence of a hidden gift? Because anxiety is often misunderstood. Most people think anxiety is simply fear, but for many people, anxiety is awareness, a heightened awareness, an awareness so sharp that it borders on painful. You see details others overlook. You notice patterns others miss. You detect shifts in mood, energy, behavior, and intention before they become obvious. And here lies the paradox. The very ability that once helped protect you is now exhausting you. The thing that saved you became the thing that traps you. Because when you spend years learning how to notice danger, eventually you start noticing everything, even when there is no danger. Especially when there is no danger. You become like a smoke detector that is so sensitive it goes off every time someone lights a candle. It was designed to protect, but now it cannot distinguish between threat and safety. And if this describes you, there's a good chance your anxiety isn't simply a disorder, it's a story. A story your nervous system has been telling for years. A story that began long before you ever learned the word anxiety. Because anxious people aren't born scanning every room, they learn to. And the reason why may completely change how you see yourself. To understand why anxious people notice what others miss, we need to understand a concept known as hypervigilance. Hypervigilance is a heightened state of sensory sensitivity accompanied by an intense search for potential threats. Imagine a soldier returning from a battlefield. Even after the war ends, their nervous system continues acting as though danger could appear at any moment. Many anxious people live this way psychologically. The battlefield disappeared, but the scanning remained. Through dramatic trauma, sometimes through emotional unpredictability. A parent whose mood changed without warning, a household filled with tension, a caregiver who was physically present but emotionally unavailable, a family environment where love felt conditional. In psychology, this frequently creates what is known as an anxious attachment style. Anxious attachment develops when a child cannot reliably predict whether emotional needs will be met. As a result, the brain becomes obsessed with monitoring facial expressions, monitoring tone of voice, monitoring emotional shifts, monitoring signs of rejection. The child learns something profound. If I can predict what happens next, I can stay safe. And so the nervous system adapts. The child becomes a tiny psychologist, a tiny detective, a tiny emotional analyst. Not because they wanted to, because they had to. Another concept relevant here is neuroception. Coined by Stephen Porges through polyvagal theory, neuroception describes the nervous system's unconscious ability to detect safety and danger. Your brain is constantly asking, am I safe? Am I accepted? Am I loved? Am I at risk? This process happens beneath conscious awareness. For anxious individuals, neuroception becomes extraordinarily sensitive, like a radar tuned far beyond normal settings. And then there is the default mode network. The default mode network is a brain system involved in self-reflection, memory, future prediction, and social analysis. Research suggests that anxious individuals often experience increased activity in these predictive systems. In simple terms, your brain is constantly running simulations, constantly imagining outcomes, constantly preparing for possibilities. This makes you remarkably perceptive, but it also makes it difficult to rest. Your mind becomes a security guard who never clocks out, a watchtower that never sleeps, a lighthouse searching endlessly for storms, even on clear days. And this is where the hidden gift becomes a hidden burden, because noticing everything comes at a price. You notice the discomfort in a conversation. You notice the disappointment behind a smile. You notice when someone is pulling away emotionally. You notice when a friendship is changing. You notice when someone says, "I'm fine," but clearly isn't. You notice, you notice, you notice. And eventually, noticing becomes exhausting, because awareness without peace becomes suffering. Many anxious people spend their lives carrying invisible grief, the grief of never fully relaxing, the grief of never fully arriving, the grief of always preparing for something that may never happen. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This perfectly describes anxiety, because many anxious people believe their hyper-awareness is simply who they are. But often it is not personality, it is adaptation. Not identity, adaptation. Not character, adaptation. You learn to survive by becoming exceptionally observant, but survival and living are not the same thing. The deepest fear beneath anxiety is often not fear of failure, not fear of embarrassment, not fear of uncertainty. It is fear of vulnerability. The fear that if you stop scanning, something bad will happen. The fear that if you finally relax, you'll lose control. The fear that safety itself is dangerous. And so simple moments become complicated. A delayed text becomes a possible rejection. A neutral expression becomes a potential problem. Silence becomes a warning sign. An unanswered call becomes evidence of abandonment. Your mind fills empty spaces with possibilities, and most of those possibilities are painful, because somewhere deep inside, your nervous system learned a heartbreaking lesson. It's safer to expect pain than to be surprised by it. This pattern follows people into adulthood in ways that are often invisible. You might become the person who constantly reads between the lines, searching for hidden meanings, searching for clues, searching for certainty. You might struggle in relationships because reassurance never seems to last. No matter how much someone loves you, your nervous system keeps asking, "But what if they leave?" You might become highly successful at work because you're constantly anticipating problems before they occur. Others call you responsible, reliable, prepared. But underneath is often anxiety disguised as competence. You might struggle with boundaries because you've spent so much time monitoring other people's emotions that you've forgotten how to listen to your own. You might become emotionally exhausted after social interactions, not because you dislike people, but because your brain was processing 20 conversations simultaneously. You were analyzing body language, facial expressions, tone shifts, micro-reactions, potential meanings, possible outcomes. You might find yourself unable to enjoy good moments, even during vacations, even during success, even during love, because part of you remains alert, watching, preparing, waiting. You might also become a chronic people pleaser, not because you're weak, because you've developed an extraordinary ability to detect discomfort. And when you detect discomfort, you instinctively try to eliminate it, even at your own expense. The crucial realization is this: these are coping strategies, not personality traits. Coping strategies, not your identity. And healing begins when you stop gaslighting yourself, when you stop saying, "I'm just dramatic, I'm just broken, I'm just difficult." No, your nervous system learned patterns, and patterns can be observed, witnessed, understood. The goal isn't to judge yourself. The goal is to witness yourself, to become aware of the moment your mind starts scanning, the moment your body starts preparing, the moment your imagination starts creating threats, because awareness is the first step toward freedom. You cannot change a pattern you refuse to see. Healing does not mean becoming less aware. It means becoming less afraid of what you notice. This distinction changes everything. Many anxious people think healing requires shutting down their sensitivity. But sensitivity is not the enemy. Sensitivity is the gift. Fear is the burden. The goal is not to destroy the radar. The goal is to recalibrate it. This often begins with inner child reparenting, learning to give yourself the safety you once searched for in others, learning to become the calm presence your younger self desperately needed. Healing also requires shadow work, the willingness to explore hidden fears instead of running from them, to ask, what am I actually afraid will happen? What old wound is being activated? What part of me still believes danger is everywhere? And perhaps most importantly, healing requires choosing softness, not weakness. Softness. The courage to stop fighting yourself. The courage to stop treating your nervous system like an enemy. The courage to rest, to trust, to breathe, to exist without constantly preparing for disaster. The philosopher Alan Watts once observed, "No amount of anxiety makes any difference to anything that is going to happen." And yet anxiety continues because it believes it is protecting us. The anxious mind is not trying to hurt you. It is trying to save you. It simply doesn't realize the emergency ended years ago. And that may be the most important truth of all. Your anxiety was never evidence that you were weak. It was evidence that you learned to survive. Your hyper-awareness was never proof that something was wrong with you. It was proof that your mind adapted. The hidden gift of anxious people is that they see what others miss. The hidden challenge is learning when to stop looking. Because healing isn't about becoming less sensitive. It isn't about becoming someone else. It isn't about fixing yourself. Healing is about becoming whole. Learning that you can notice everything without carrying everything. Learning that awareness does not require fear. Learning that safety is no longer something you must earn. And if this message resonated with you, remember this. The qualities that exhausted you may also be the qualities that make you deeply compassionate, deeply perceptive, and deeply human. You were never broken. You were adapting. Now the task is not to survive. The task is to live. And sometimes the greatest gift isn't learning how to see more. It's finally learning that you're safe enough to close your eyes and rest.